In beginning this section of his narrative, Luke has an object in mind. In writing thus, placing things in a real time scale with real references, the landmarks of the time. Remember, the time was counted in a different way in those days. He is saying without saying, what you are about to hear is history. This is fact. I have researched it. Indeed, earlier in this document, because this is from chapter 3, but earlier on we do have that declaration to Theophilus that what he is about to hear is researched. We have the same affirmation in the beginning of the follow-up, the Acts of the Apostles. This is fact. And indeed, in the Acts of the Apostles, if you look carefully, at one point, it's when they're at Troas, Luke starts to use not they, but we. He was part of this history. Now, this part of history can be collocated in world history. Pope Benedict, in his volume on Jesus of Nazareth, the third one to come out, the one on the narrative of the birth, does have a very interesting excursus on this historic background, and at one point goes into some depth into what was going on in the whole Mediterranean world at the time, and it's important to grasp it. It was the right time. It was the only time that what had to happen would happen. Look at the situation. Pope Benedict describes how the Emperor Augustus was keen on the Pax Augustiniana. He wanted this peace in the whole Roman Empire under him. And there is a big altar that he laid as it were, the emblem of that, an altar to peace. And this Pax Romana was what allowed then the gospel to spread. The Incarnation was happening on two levels. It was happening in the preparation of a people, the one people that believed in the one true God, formed by a slow process of divine education, and therefore the Lord didn't have that catechetical work to do. It was done, and he used the structure that was there in the chosen people. But then this other bit too was very important. We can't separate Bethlehem from Jerusalem, only about 30 miles away. He was coming for a purpose. He was coming to put right what was lost in Eden. And so what happened in Jerusalem some 33 years later? We have over the cross, where those words are heard, "It is finished," what here begins in Bethlehem. What do we have? The inscription written in 3 languages. And in fact, the inscription is still to be seen in Santa Croce in Rome. As some of you know, I have a splinter of the True Cross from Santa Croce in the second tabernacle in the Hermitage. But that's part, the major one, of a whole series of relics of the Passion, one of which is this, the inscription, and it goes backwards for us, because it's following the first of the languages, which is the Hebrew, starting therefore from right to left. And then you've got the Greek and the Latin, and it's Greek of the time, with the letters written as they were at the time, and then the Latin. So what that means is that these 3 languages were going to be the vehicles of transportation of this power, coming now in explosive way into Bethlehem, and therefore our time and geography. The Latin language was going to be important. It would go from a very Judaic origin right to the heart of the empire, Rome. And the Acts, precisely, that second volume of Luke, finishes when it gets to Rome, fulfilling the prophecy that the Lord gave there in the upper room. So, we have then the Greek language. This was what English is to the time. Paul had good Greek. Luke had good Greek. The people in Rome understood Greek. There were so many slaves there. Greek was the lingua franca of the whole Mediterranean basin. So do you see how important it is? Greek was the language then of the New Testament and also of the liturgy of the East in the beginning. Hebrew was to have a destiny linked with Jerusalem, precisely because it was the city of peace, Jerusalem, which did not know what pertained to its peace. It would refuse the grace, and those terrible words would be invoked upon the Jewish people. May his blood be upon us and upon our children. We don't know what that meant in cosmic history, but it was the beginning of the end of Jerusalem. And not long afterwards, that other prophecy of the Lord was fulfilled. There would be not one stone on a stone. So the Christians were warned about this, and they went to the east of the Jordan, to Jamnia. And the small band there were able to hold on also to the Jewish traditions within their own sphere. But mainly it went into the Greek sphere from that point onwards. Why am I bringing all this into it? We're handling here God at work on every possible level. If one then makes a jump of some 6 centuries and looks at something going on in an area actually which was under Christian influence but weakened by a division, Donatism in Africa, North Africa, one has there coming in something which is not at all of the same order. And if one looks carefully at this, and I'm going to say it once and for all, why should something with such aggression come into this piece from somewhere and want to restart this work of evangelization in the name of the same God and the same angel which came at the beginning here in the Annunciation? Well, I would gently suggest to you that it was only possible, the success of this, if the same force which was then at work in the French Revolution, in the Communist Revolution, and the other outbreaks of anti-Christian persecution around the world, as has always hated the work of grace and the work of salvation. Satan! There's no other explanation for success on that level. That same force which right now hates Christmas and any trace of the name of Christ in this, by now, profane feast. If you listen to what's being pumped at you from the media, it's a gentle erosion from some other sinister force. This is what we're at, and even Christians are taken in by it. But there's more. This Christmas, that same satanic force is going to be hitting hard at all the powers of grace, all the powers of the Incarnation itself, in our own assemblies. You watch now what will go on in the next few days. Suddenly, the numbers going to church will increase many times over, and so will the communions. And how many will be in confession first? There was no room in the inn, we find, at Bethlehem. It's the same exactly in the Bethlehem of many a human heart. Cold, dark, damp, callous hearts will welcome the Lord this Christmas. Where do we fit in this? It doesn't actually even avoid our own family, this plague. I will give you one, and just one example, and leave it with you because it concerns you all who have anything to do with children. This feast is all to do about the peace of heaven on earth. Remember the chant of the angels to the shepherds? Peace. The way that children now interact around Christmas is quite symptomatic of our society. They have to be gratified. It's all for them. They have rights which by now they will not relinquish. They command their parents. Now, in practice, what will those parents do? For the sake of some kind of peace, they will make sure that the children will have what most titillates them. And what will it be? The chances are that it will be something which will profoundly devastate and ruin their peacefulness. I mean, on the level of their psyche. Watch now what children are doing once Christmas has come. Each child will have a glorious world of his own with which to engage in a bubble where there is uttermost satisfaction, usually on some kind of ultra-modern gadget, often of a screen form. Okay, there will be a certain peace in the atmosphere. But you watch the evolution of that child as time goes on. He will become more and more addicted to that gadget and the form of the screen. He will no longer be able to settle to a quiet book. He will find human beings, and in the first instance his own parents and siblings, very dull and uninteresting. The screen will be far more the centre of gravity, time and attention. Down the line, that same child, by now devastated, will have forgotten the games that we used to play, handed down from the Middle Ages sometimes, from generation to generation, will be very little able to actually invent a game of his own with simple things, and will be very little able to sit down quietly and be interested in the person next to him. He will forget reality because he'll be absorbed by virtuality. This is the gift that we're giving to our children at Christmas. It keeps them at bay. We have our hands free. But what kind of a problem do we give tomorrow? Think about these things before you just churn up a lot of money for a lot of devastation and lose true peace of heart in the instance of just a bit of peace and quiet at home.